What's going on, Lion fans? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined once again by Jeremy Reisman. Jeremy, we have finally come to the end of mandatory minicamp, and this is going to be the first update that people are getting directly from you on the YouTube channel, mainly because we were just like, with minicamp being back to back to back, did it really make sense for us to do a new video every single day just to kind of update things?
I know some people wanted it, and maybe we'll get to do something like that when training camp rolls around. But it's a very busy time of year for us in a not busy time of year. It's just like one busy week where back to back to back we're posting observations and doing as much as we can on the website. But yeah, I'm glad you're giving me the opportunity to kind of recap everything, because it's nice to kind of have a big more full picture of the entire week here at the end of the week now.
Well, Jeremy, like we kind of pointed out, you are the boss, so it's my responsibility to give you opportunities to talk
right.
as much as you possibly want to.
Keep the answers a little shorter this week, maybe.
No, that's a little bit of an inside joke, guys. But if you guys haven't had a chance to read all of Jeremy's amazing observations, that is probably where you want to go after this video, in case there's anything that, again, you're just looking for, updates on specific players or specific situations. Jeremy and I are going to try to keep it fairly simple on just some of the things that the Lions went through, whether it's media availability or things that happened on the field. The best place to go is always going to the website, because, like I said, Jeremy and the guys put so much effort into being as detailed as they can be in those written pieces. But let's kick this off, Jeremy, with a pretty much like a softball question. What was the biggest thing that you kind of took away from these 3 days of practices that the Lions had?
To me, without a doubt, it has to be that the cornerback room so far seems as billed. It seems like it's actually currently living up to the hype. And, I don't want to read too much into things without the pads on, but if there's one position that you can at least have a relatively good grasp on how they're playing, I think it is the skill position guys. And I've been to enough of these mini camps, training camps, all those sort of things in the past 6 years. I've seen a lot of bad cornerback play. This, to me, like, it looked legitimately good to me. Guys like Carlton Davis, guys like Terrion Arnold, even a guy, Amik Robertson, who I didn't think was going to play in the nickel spot here because he wasn't great at the nickel spot with the Raiders. All of those guys look legit, man. And I'm not here to declare the problem fixed. I'm not here to declare everyone who's playing there is officially going to be their starter and they're going to be Pro Bowlers or anything like that. But this team seems to have finally gotten the guys that actually fit what they want to do and are actually out there performing. They're giving Amon-Ra a tough time. They're giving J-Mo a tough time. They're making Jared Goff hold on to the ball longer, and it's making the entire defense better. And I think that was the other part of it, is talking with the players. Everyone seems so excited about the cornerback room. The safeties seem excited about it because they can play a little differently. The linebackers seem excited about it. Alex Anzalone was talking about it and saying, like, now we can be so much more aggressive, knowing that those guys are going to be in man coverage. We don't always have to drop in zone anymore. We can blitz a lot more. And then Aiden Hutchinson's like, that's my best friend, is a good cornerback room, because now I got more time to get to the quarterback. And so I'm buying a little bit of Kool-Aid. I try not to drink too much Kool-Aid in June, but after what I saw in the cornerback room, particularly with those three, quote unquote starters, I'm very much buying that this cornerback room is going to be much better. And I think that could definitely have, kind of a ripple effect across the defense. And that's something to be pretty darn excited about.
Yeah. And to piggyback off of that, I know how you said, like, again, they're not in pads right now. So how, typically we try to lower expectations, but I kind of agree with you. Once you would think, and obviously we'll have to see once training camp kind of kicks off, but you would think that the physicality on the defense is only going to kick up a notch once pads are on. So now, these corners can be even more physical. The safeties can be a little bit more physical. Obviously, the defensive line is going to be generating more pressure because it's actually going to be like more so, probably about 50 to 75% pass rush that they're going to be putting out there to be able to simulate more game-like atmosphere. So if the defense and the secondary is playing this well now, I tend to think that, like, that is a good omen for what to see, like what to expect in training camp once that finally kicks off.
Yeah, and to people who are rightly saying, like, I'm gonna listen to anything anybody's saying now, wait until training camp. Like, I'm with you, but it was also pretty darn apparent this time last year that Brian Branch was something special. Like right. you can see flashes, and that's maybe the one exception to like what good cornerback play that I have seen in the past. And like, that's what I'm saying though. I'm starting to see some of that. And when you think that like we haven't even talked about Emmanuel Mosley, Brian Branch hasn't been here, Kirby Joseph hasn't been here, like that secondary could look even better than what I thought. It looked pretty solid in the past month, or really, yeah, the past full month or two.
I will say, like, going through some of your observations, that seemed to be a fairly consistent theme, though. Like, not just the secondary, but the defense as a whole, just kind of having more better days than down days. And again, no pads, and it's really tough to gauge how much Ben Johnson is trying to test them at this point in the offseason. Sure. But we all know, and I think a lot of us feel very confident that the offense is going to hold up their end of the bargain come week one. Has what you've seen so far, in these 3 days of minicamp, as well as what you were seeing previously in OTAs, do you get this sense that the defense is much improved outside of just the secondary, but like, again, from the secondary all the way down to what you're seeing with just how this group is playing together?
Maybe a little bit. I'll say there hasn't been as many standouts in the rest of the group. I think we already kind of know what the linebacker group is, but I definitely saw some strides with Jack Campbell, right? To me, it certainly seems like Jack Campbell is going to be your week one starter at the Mike position. I don't think it's maybe necessarily as much of a competition as it was last year with Derrick Barnes, because I think one thing that maybe hasn't been talked about too much is I think Derrick Barnes is really going to be more of a Sam linebacker now. I think that he's going to inherit much more of a pass rushing role now that I think they trust Jack Campbell a little bit more. And so it's not necessarily a demotion for Derrick Barnes, because I think they still value him. I think they still trust in his ability to drop into coverage. I mean, he made the biggest interception of the year last year, and played generally good football, but I think they also like him as a pass rusher. That's kind of what he loves to play, right? I mean, he played it at Purdue. He did it a little bit last year, and while he wasn't great at the Sam linebacker role necessarily, or as a pass rusher, a pure pass rusher, it's something that he loves to do. I remember when he was put in that role last year, I even asked him, like, are you excited to kind of like tap into those Purdue roots? And like his eyes lit up. He's like, I told my girlfriend about this. I'm like, I'm so excited. And so I think it's a role that he's going to fit in well. I don't think, it's not going to be as much of a full-time role like it was before, but I think the linebacker group is going to be just interesting to watch, even though I think we kind of know who they are already. When it comes to the defensive line, I think I wanted to see more, but at the same time, what can you see when the pads aren't on? Like, I don't want to judge anyone too much. I'm certainly more optimistic about a guy like Levi Onwuzurike than I thought I'd be, just because he's out there playing a bunch. He's getting a ton of reps, which alone I think is an accomplishment given everything he's gone through, and a lot of those are with the first team. So they at least view him as having that kind of potential. But otherwise, it's just kind of hard to see anyone else on that defensive line making a consistent splash when they can't use the biggest tool in their tool shed, which is their physicality. So to me, everything else is kind of like a work in progress, or a to be determined maybe is a better word for it when it comes to the rest of the defense. But who the linebacker group is. Once the full defensive line is out there together, obviously no DJ Reader yet. We'll kind of have a bigger sense of what's going to happen there. So
yeah.
We'll see, I guess, is my answer to your original question.
Well, I'm glad you kind of went that direction, because, again, the next question I was going to kind of have was, like, was there anybody that really stood out to you? But I think you hit on three big names just now in Derrick Barnes, Levi Onwuzurike, and Jack Campbell, of guys that specifically on this defensive side of the football that are either ascending or, again, possibly seeing some changes in their roles. And so let's start first with Derrick Barnes, because I think that one's very interesting. I really liked what I saw out of Derrick Barnes last year. I think we all did, again, going into training camp. The Lions drafting Jack Campbell, and most of us probably thought, like, oh, Jack is probably going to, by the time training camp ends, going to be the starting Mike linebacker, and that just wasn't the case. The Lions more so decided, like, hey, we're going to split, the responsibilities. But what you said about Derrick Barnes maybe taking on more Sam linebacker responsibilities, I think that could be a really interesting way of, Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn talk about this all the time, getting their best playmakers on the field. And while Derrick Barnes hasn't been able to be an exclusive pass rusher, like you pointed out, he did this at a high level at Purdue, maybe giving him an offseason where he gets more opportunities to work on some pass rushing situations maybe that could be another wrinkle to this defense. Not to mention just the versatility of that group. That, like, just because you see Derrick Barnes in the field
Yeah.
doesn't mean that he's always going to be pass rushing, because, like you pointed out, he's shown the skill set to do well in coverage. He's a great tackler in the run game. I'm really excited about what the Lions could potentially be doing with him.
Yeah, and some people will probably look back at last year and be like, "This is a terrible idea. He wasn't good at it last year." But you have to remember, they threw that on his plate in the middle of the season. That was like, James Houston got hurt. We don't know what to do. We don't know who's playing
at position. Like, Derrick Barnes tried to play some Sam linebacker. Jack Campbell tried to play. Like, no one was great at it.
Right.
So I'm perfectly fine with you guys with the team once again being like, hey, let's try Derrick Barnes at it in a more focused mindset than we did last year.
Exactly. Because you can't even get a lot of good reps in the middle of the season, right? In practice, you only practice 3 times a week, and you're only allowed a certain amount of padded practices for the entire year. If you start in July and get it through his head, like, this is what we want you to do this year, and then you're getting reps in minicamp, you're getting reps in OTAs, you're getting reps in training camp, he can build on that skill that he had in college. He can fit it into maybe probably what is a different scheme than what he was doing at Purdue. So, I think there's a chance for this to really work. And listen, he's not going to be a full-time pass rusher. He's going to be doing a lot of different things, and he might be playing some Mike too, right? And that's the great part about it too, is the depth in that room. So if Jack goes down, if Alex goes down, like, there are guys that can come in, very much including Derrick Barnes, that can shift roles, which is why from the very beginning, Kelvin Shepherd has promoted cross training across all 3 positions, and you're starting to see some of those benefits now.
And now let's move over to another guy that was in that same draft class, in Levi Onwuzurike. So Dan Campbell had a lot of positive things to say about him earlier in this week. And Levi was one of those guys that I had very low expectations for last year, just because him being on the field at all, him being able to get through training camp and not have any major setbacks, was such a huge accomplishment in itself. And for him to make the initial 53. With that said, we didn't see him play a ton, and there were a lot of games where he was inactive. You kind of hinted at it, but do you kind of get this sense, like, with him getting some reps with the first team, that the Lions could be looking to ramp him up more, and at least we possibly see him active a little bit more this year?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a little bit of a hurdle that he has to make the team first, right? I don't think it's necessarily even a guarantee, considering, the Lions have drafted a lot of defensive tackles since they drafted him, right? Including Mekhi Wingo, a guy that is going to do a lot of the same things that he does. But I do think it's very telling that they told him to go put 15, 20 pounds on. We trust your back enough that it can handle that much weight, which is, it's a significant amount of weight, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of changing your body type in a little bit of a way. And so I think that shows confidence. I think getting him those first 10 reps, seeing how much his body can handle a lot of reps in the spring, and then coming back in the summer and probably doing it all over again, although there'll be some reinforcements coming back and in that time as well. But yeah, I do think there's still a belief in Levi Onwuzurike in the building. I truly do think that. And you're right to point out that Dan Campbell was very complimentary of him. He also, tried to pull back as much as he could, because he's like, the pads aren't on, so we don't really know for sure. And that's the right thing to say, because it is true. I did like some, he flashed at times in minicamp, but I think the real test is when he has to put those 300 pounds, to work. When, the other factor of this too is he's going up mostly against backup offensive linemen, because the Lions, Frank Ragno's not out there. They're rotating a bunch of, second and third team guys out there just to keep their veterans healthy. Zeitler wasn't practicing most of the time as well. So, I wouldn't say necessarily I'm optimistic, but I'm a little bit more hopeful, I think I would say, than I was going into minicamp.
And I think that's, again, I still think that's a step up, because I think last year, like, Levi was like fringe, like, hey, he could not make the team. And again, I just remember a lot of people being shocked that, like, day one of training camp, they're like, oh no, he's practicing. And it's like, wait, he wasn't even, like, I think, like, the last report on minicamp was like, he wasn't even, like, he was walking like oddly on grass. Like, so either way, it is a huge step in the right direction. Another player taking a step in the right direction is Jack Campbell. Having a practice this week where he's getting 2 interceptions, and reading that and getting those types of updates on Jack had me excited, because when I was evaluating him at once the Lions had drafted him, that was the aspect of his game that really stood out to me, was how well he dropped in coverage, how well he seemed to understand zone coverage. He's a good run defender as well, but I was always more tantalized by like what he could possibly mean for the Lions if they had to keep a linebacker on the field. Like, potentially this is the guy that you would probably want to do it. What did you see that really for you kind of stood out most from him this past week?
Honestly, it was his media session, which is interesting because Jack Campbell media sessions have notoriously been kind of dull. I think he would admit it. I think the linebacker, I mean, he was even asked, I think Alex Anzalone was asked, like, so, what do you see from Jack Campbell? Is he coming out of his shell a little bit? And he's like, no, not at all. Like, no, he's still being Jack Campbell in terms of just like, he's all about the work. He's not, no, bells and whistles with him necessarily, but he was a little bit more open. He was a little bit more honest. And I think maybe the best, most promising answer he gave was just talking about the mistakes he made, because in the past, in the first year, this was something that I was mildly concerned about, is he was just so critical of himself. He was so hard on himself. And, you want a player that isn't happy with his own performance, right? You want a guy who's going to be internally motivated to get better. But I think there's a limit to that, where you can be so overly critical about yourself that it impacts your confidence, right? Mm-hmm. And I was a little afraid he was heading down that road early on, and I knew at the time, like, let's not jump the whistle, jump the gun. Whatever, jump the gun. There you go. But like he came into this and he's talking about his mistakes, and he's saying, I now view mistakes as like a necessary part of growth. Like that's something that has to come. Mm-hmm. I'm embracing the mistakes because it's something that I learn about. If I'm not going to get better if I don't make the mistakes. And not only that, he's not just witnessing his own mistakes. He's now got so much of an understanding of the defense that when he's watching from the sideline, he's like, oh, that guy just made a mistake. Let me go check the film. Yep, he made that mistake. I was right. And so like him being able to diagnose from the sidelines is also, I think, huge. I mean, so much of the linebacker position is just knowledge of the scheme. It's just knowing not only what your job is, but everyone around you and why your job is what it is. And so that's why, to me, I think linebacker is one of the toughest positions in the NFL to play as a rookie. Mm-hmm. And so it made sense to me for the Lions to take him slowly. Let's ease him in. We have Derrick Barnes. We like Derrick Barnes. Let's ease him in, be kind of a rotational guy. Maybe we'll try him out at other positions just to like see where we can get the most out of him right now. But to me, I think just knowledge of the scheme, in addition to a newfound acceptance or confidence in it's okay to make mistakes, makes me most confident that he's going to take a year two jump.
That's, again, and I think that's something that a lot of Lions fans should be excited about, because with so much of that rookie class kind of hitting the ground running, right? Jameer's having a breakout season. Sam Laporta elevating himself into that conversation of being like one of the top 5, possibly even top 3 best tight ends in the NFL after his rookie performance. Brian Branch, I think, came so close to being an all-pro at nickel. Like, it was probably within fingertips of him getting that type of accomplishment. But Jack was the guy that I thought, you look back at him and it's like, man, he has all the skill sets. But to your point, there was always that concern of like, but is he too much in his own head? Is he putting too much pressure on himself, just from either being a first round pick or being this 4-year starter at Iowa that was like a captain that people look to? And some people don't make that adjustment, but it at least sounds like, from what you're saying, that going into year 2, he's kind of learned to accept the things that he can't control and not allowing the things that he can't control to really like affect him.
Exactly. Yeah. So
with that said, obviously I want to give you an opportunity to talk about, in your opinion, some guys that you've seen as big risers and something that fans may not enjoy hearing, but like anybody that I don't want to say is a at a risk, but just like, oh, I expected more out of, and I didn't quite see that.
It's probably Hendon Hooker.
Okay.
Yeah. I probably came in with a little bit too high of expectations, to be completely honest. Everything that I should put it this way, everything that he's struggling with makes complete sense, right? Mm-hmm. Some of the accuracy issues probably has to deal with throwing to a bunch of receivers he's not used to, right? And, considering he's playing with both the second and the third team most days, he's also playing with a lot of different guys. That's like 6 or 7 different receivers that he's throwing to every time. And they all, run routes differently. They all run routes at different paces. They all have their own tendencies. And that's tough on a young quarterback. And then the other thing is the reading of the defense. He's holding onto the ball way too long, which is extremely common amongst young quarterbacks as they're learning complex new offenses. And, we hear from Lions players all the time, whether it's wide receivers or quarterbacks, like, this is such a detailed offense where every step matters, not only with the receivers, not only with the routes, but with the quarterback too. And so it's a lot of information being thrown to him at one time. And so, yeah, the processing skills are slow right now. That makes complete sense, but it's been bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
He's been bad. And if the Lions went into the regular season tomorrow, Nate Sudfeld would be your backup quarterback. Like, he'd have to be. Because Hooker's just not ready yet. And so I think Lions fans that went into the season thinking like, okay, backup job is set. We got Hendon Hooker. We're all good. Mm-hmm. I'm not entirely sure that he's going to be the week 1 backup quarterback. Now he's going to make the team. Let's be be completely clear. And listen, the next month or two, when we get into training camp is going to be huge for him. Like, there's a reason why they're throwing all these reps, the second and third team reps at him now. They're probably going to do the same to start training camp. They're probably going to throw 3/4 his way in every preseason game. And so there's room to improve. There's room to build in all these skills that he's lacking right now to maybe get to a point where he can be the backup quarterback right now, for this season. But he's not particularly close right now. And it's all fine. Doesn't mean he's a bust. Doesn't mean he was a bad pick, but just means he needs the reps badly, and Lions fans should just not. I don't think they should feel so secure that they have the backup quarterback position figured out right now.
I think it's another thing that people at least should probably take a big sigh of relief that the Lions got Jared Goff's contract done, right? Like, there's
sure, yeah.
Also no pressure of like, hey, Hendon Hooker has to start, building that level of consistency even in this season. Like, he's got a good 4 or 5 years kind of built in with Jared's new extension to just be able to learn and, like you said, work out those kinks coming from a system like Tennessee that was kind of the biggest knock, right? That Tennessee was a very simplistic system. He didn't have to do a lot of progressions. There was a lot of easy timing type routes that he was able to hit. The NFL is just like you said, right? You're going to come into this league in any team, and you're going to have to learn how to make progressions. You're going to have to learn how to be able to read defenses and understand where your checkdowns are and how quickly to get to them. It's just everything moves faster at this level.
Yep. Yeah. Give him time, though. Give him time. I'm not trying to get myself labeled as a Hooker hater. Like, I think you just got to give him some time.
Well, with that said, is there anybody that on the other side of that you're just like, hey, like, I went into this and they've actually like surprised me by like how well they've played, again, through OTAs and as well as minicamp.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of hate to keep going back to the corner room because we've talked about it so much, but like Amik Robertson to me is that guy. He's a guy that, again, when I kind of read the scouting reports, when I went back and looked at some of the numbers, some of the film, it seemed like he did his best work on the outside. And so I did not have a lot of expectations for him to play in the nickel spot and succeed at the nickel spot, but he did. And it's, I think out of everyone that I charted, he probably had the most pass breakups of any player on defense, taking the entire spring into account. And the other thing is you also have to factor in who he was playing against. Yeah. If you're playing nickel against the Lions offense, that means you're going up against Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, two guys who are the best at their position. And so if you're sticking out going against those guys day to day, that to me tells you can hang. And that got me very excited. Now, I don't know where Amik Robertson is going to fit when we get to week 1, when Brian Branch comes back. Is he playing more safety? Is he playing more nickel? Do they slide Amik and play him a little bit more outside when Brian Branch is back? I kind of think they like where he's at right now. I think, even, Brad Holmes had mentioned how much they like him in the nickel. So I think he's probably nickel to stay, which is a little bit surprising to me. But at the same time, given everything that I saw in the past 3 weeks here, I'm like, okay, this guy can do it. And that was a pretty significant surprise to me.
That is a little surprising to me because Morgan and I did a film study on Amik Robertson, and both him and I came away pretty impressed with what he did on the outside as well. And it was just like, hey, even if the Lions did draft a corner, which they ended up doing in Terrion Arnold, like that corner was going to have a fight for his life to get that CB2 spot because I thought, Amik was so good on the outside, even at 5'9". But it kind of goes back to what we were saying about Derrick Barnes possibly playing Sam. This coaching staff is going to try to get their best guys out there. And yes, this secondary and probably this defense as a whole will be a little bit more flexible, which is kind of ironic considering like the history that this team has with a coach wanting to have a multiple
right.
But they may actually have that in this year with guys that they can swap in and out at the linebacker position or the D line position. And like now you're saying with the secondary where Brian Branch can literally bounce between safety and nickel. Amik Robertson can bounce between nickel and outside corner. The same with Carlton Davis being able to bounce between outside and nickel. You have Ifeatu Melifonwu who can like rotate in at any given time and be this matchup safety or this ridiculous effective blitzing safety. Like there's so much that this team has. But I'm right there with you. That is a little bit surprising just because I was fully ready for us to go into training camp and it to be like an Amik Robertson versus Terrion Arnold like fist fight.
Right. And the other piece of this that we didn't even mention is Ennis Rakestraw, right?
Yeah.
Because he started like in rookie minicamp, he was at the nickel. Unfortunately, like he was kind of battling injuries and very much on a pitch count all of minicamp. So I don't really know where he fits into the puzzle. But if he's at nickel too, like, well, suddenly you have Brian Branch, you have Ennis Rakestraw, and you have Amik Robertson all, probably having a lot of potential at that position. So maybe then you do start to kick Amik out, or maybe you kick Ennis out to the outside. That it's when Dan Campbell said a couple days ago, like, we have so many guys right now that we don't know what to do with it. We truly don't know who the week one starters are going to be. I think he's telling the truth there because I'm kind of in that same boat. Like if you see Amik Robertson playing so well at the nickel, what do you do? What do you do when Brian Branch comes out? Do you basically redshirt Ennis Rakestraw? It sounds weird to do that.
Gives you that comfortability though, right? Like if he's dealing with I believe it was a groin injury, there's now no need to like rush him back. There is no pressure of like, hey, we need to have you back in getting training camp snaps. Like, no, literally take your time, rehab as much as you need to, learn the playbook, and once we get into the season, we'll fit you in where we need to fit you in because corner and secondary play is one of those positions where you can see injuries. Carlton Davis has had a pretty extenuous injury history. Like there's going to possibly opportunities. Why rush a guy like Ennis Rakestraw to get him out there to get snaps when, listen, we're going to let the guys that are healthy battle it out.
Yeah. And it's something that I love about this coaching staff too, is that they're so flexible with their rookies. If they're out there and balling, we're going to start them week one. But if we don't have to, if we have guys that we trust already in the lineup, we'll take either a red shirt year or, a red shirt half season. Like you said, with Jack Campbell, right? No need to rush a guy out there that maybe we don't trust or that hasn't gotten the reps in training camp or is battling an injury. Like we don't need to force that. We're good enough everywhere else right now. And and we've got so much on the line right now that why risk it?
I like I said, I love all that. And it's kind of interesting that we spent most of this video talking about the defense. I want to give you the opportunity. Is there any, outside of like, Hendon Hooker, is there anything on the offense that's like new, that's like a surprise, or is it just kind of like the same old Jared Goff is Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown is Amon-Ra St. Brown? Like, was there anything else that was telling?
There's a lot of that, I'm not going to lie, where it's just like, the offense is what it is. And I would say those that are maybe concerned that the reports of the offense weren't as good as maybe they have been in the past or as good as you'd want them to be for a top 5 offense. The thing I would continually remind people is that this team is such a physical offense. They like to run the ball so much. We're not seeing any of that right now. We can't. The pads aren't on. They're barely running any run plays, and that's such an integral part about what they do that the fact that the pass game isn't working as well because they're working on the pass game and the defense knows it. And, when they're running so many of these, late game scenario things, they have to throw the ball 20 times and the defense knows it. And so, I mean, we could talk a little bit about JMO if you want, because I think that to me is the most interesting new thing on offense. And, I got to be careful about what I say here, but
Mm-hmm.
like, to me, it's just it's a very balanced, there are a lot of good, there are a lot of still things out there that I need to see better from him, where it's just, the drops are still occasionally there. Sometimes it appears there's an occasional lapse in judgment, or, running the wrong route, or whatever it is. But I would say, like, the improvements still mostly outweigh all of that certain things. Like,
Yeah.
you've all by now probably seen the over the shoulder catch that he made with Carlton Davis on the sideline in tight coverage. That's kind of regular stuff that we're seeing now. It's not perfect. They missed on a couple deep shots on Thursday. It was a windy day though, so one slips through his hands. You're going to see, like, I think some of the inconsistency things you see with Jameson Williams are kind of here to stay. I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but like, he's going to have an occasional lapse. He's going to have an occasional drop. And the key, I think, is to not get too frustrated with him. Like, it's obviously not great, but some of the big plays are going to offset that, is what I'm trying to say. Like, he is going to have some big explosive plays, and I think you're going to see a lot more of them this year than you did last year. And that's why you have him. Right. It'd be nice if he was a Josh Reynolds 1-to-1. You can rely on this guy 99% of the time. And unfortunately, the 1% happens in the NFC Championship game. But I think you're going to get an explosive, exciting player in Jameson Williams, just maybe not on the level that you could trust some of the other guys on this offense over the past few years.
Well, and for me, it kind of goes back to what Dan Campbell said last year when talking about Jameson Williams, right? And people, wanted to kind of skew that into a way of saying, like, well, JMO has, like, terrible hands. And it was just like Dan kind of saying, like, no, these are things that we kind of expect. We don't expect him to be this perfect hand catcher. What we have him for and what we expect him to do is the big plays, is to be able to be reliable when we really need him in those bigger moments. And the thing that, Morgan and I have talked about when talking about JMO is, while JMO did make more big plays last year, he started, as the season kind of going on, started making those smaller plays and making those, short out routes or those slant routes, and being able to be a somewhat reliable, yards after catch kind of guy. And so if JMO can still be the big play threat that we've always expected him to be since the Lions have drafted him, but he can start to be a little bit more consistent in those other areas and start to run some of those Josh Reynolds type routes, and being somebody that Jared Goff can find, on a third down or things of that situation when, everyone knows that it's probably going to Saint, that is still a big win for him.
Yeah. And that's to me where I'm still, like, I'm not sure how close he is to that. Like, he's certainly trending in the right direction. I don't know how far he can get in that direction. I don't think he can ever really be as quote unquote reliable as Josh Reynolds. And I know how ridiculous it sounds given how everything finished with his career, but I do mean that. But yeah, I think that their goal is to at least have a little bit of that sprinkled into his game, right? I mean, you can't survive with your first round pick just running 9 routes all day. He's going to tire himself out, first of all, and second of all, the defense is just going to take that away from him eventually.
Well, and not to mention, like, on the other side of that, you also can't throw the ball 20 times to St. Brown. You can't throw it 15 times to Sam Laporta. Like, JMO's going to have to get targets, and it's going to have to be, like you said, more than just 9 routes and more than just, deep shots down the field. All right, this video is going on really long. I do want to at least have, like, a real quick question. Looking ahead to training camp, we still don't know when this is actually taking place. What is something, though, that you are highly anticipating, that you're really excited for once training camp kind of kicks off, once we get those dates?
I think I got to kick it back to the defense here and just see how everything works together. If the coverage is as good as it looks in the spring, what does that mean for the pass rush to me? Yeah. The pass rush to me is the other piece of the puzzle that you can't really get a good grasp on at this time of year, because no one's allowed to touch a quarterback. So can Levi continue his good spring? What happens when Aleem and DJ Reader come out there? And we might not see Reader until late in training camp, but what happens then? Marcus Davenport, he's a guy we haven't seen at all, but he seemed like towards the end of spring, he was starting to work more vigorously with trainers. And so I expect him to be out there, day one of training camp. What does that look like? Does he have a chance to win a starting spot? What about Josh Pascal? He's a guy that I didn't see a ton from, even though he's getting a bunch of reps this spring. But again, he's a very physical player.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens when the pads come on. So like, to me, it's not just like the secondary and can they continue their hot spring, but how that impacts everybody else, particularly that pass rush, because that's something that, again, it's hard to get a grasp on in the spring. And it's maybe one of the bigger questions still facing the defense, really facing the entire team.
That's a really good point. And that's like, I always, whenever it's, transitioning on to training camp, that's always the thing that I'm most excited for is like, how does things start to look once physicality gets introduced on the defensive side? Like you said, starting to see the running game. How does David Montgomery look? How frequently is Craig Reynolds being used? Like, there's a lot of aspects of things that we just haven't been able to see yet. And so I've been very and pleasantly like surprised and excited about everything that we've been hearing out of minicamp. It's really that training camp push that we'll actually get to kind of get a feel for what does everything look like really together when it's more, realistic to Sunday type football.
Exactly. Yeah. It's why like that first preseason game is always really excited. Is like, okay, now it's not just training camp, pads on, but no tackling. Like you're full on tackling. You're doing it against a different team. But then the preseason gets boring again.
Yeah. Once they start taking starters out and you have to start looking down at the paper to remember like numbers, the names. Yeah.
Right.
No, man, I appreciate you doing this and again, coming on, giving the audience such a great recap. And again, if you guys are looking for more information, Jeremy's articles are on prideofdetroit.com. Go check those out. Go through the 3 days of minicamp and just see, other things that maybe he didn't get to talk about in today's video. I will do my best to make sure I put timestamps in this video since it is so long. So maybe it'll make it a little bit easier for people to jump around. But no, dude, I appreciate you doing this. And I agree, like, hopefully when training camp kicks around, maybe we do these a little bit more consistently, just so that there's a day-by-day breakdown of what's going on in training camp, because there's a lot of great observations to take from practices when those kind of kick off. So with all that said, like I've said a number of times, go over to the website, read some articles. The guys put in so much work to be able to put out some amazing written content. So definitely go and show your support there. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell over on the YouTube channel. That's going to keep you plugged into all the video content that we're able to upload, usually 2 to 3 videos a week. And yeah, with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Jeremy. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you all in the next one.